Hello, welcome to Papa Nick's Music. I am, as always, your host, Papa Nick Lewis, and today we are talking about Mike Nesmith. I love Michael Nesmith. Oh man, he is right up there. He's in that top level in my musical pantheon. He's up there with Brian Wilson, Randy Newman, Joe Jackson. I mean, these are my heroes. I first became aware of Mike Nesmith, like most people my age, through the Monkees, right? I mean, when I was a kid, I'm not quite old enough to have caught the Monkees when they were in primetime first run, but when I was a kid, they were a staple on Saturday morning TV. So I did see just about all of the episodes of the Monkees then, and Mike was always my favorite Monkee. I liked the way he looked. I liked, the wool hat and all of that. I liked the fact that he played the guitar, and I liked guitarists when I was a kid. I liked his sense of humor. I liked his delivery. I liked the sound of his voice. I mean, he was my favorite Monkee. And so in the '90s, his production company must have signed a release deal with somebody because man, his old catalog was coming out on CD, and you better believe I started snapping those things up. And then fast forward several more years, started buying things directly through his website, Video Ranch, mostly because, well, I like the idea of buying directly from the artist, but also if you bought something from Video Ranch, there was a really good chance that it would come signed. You could request autographs on a lot of it. And you don't know this, but just on the other side of that door, the hallway out there, my wife and I refer to that as the Hall of Fame. That's where we have memorabilia that we've collected hanging up on the wall. I've got a lot of autographs out there. And the two artists that I have managed to scrounge the most autographs as far as representation in the Hall of Fame goes are Brian Wilson and Michael Nesmith. But I'm barely scratching the surface of what I've got. I've got Nesmith autographed stuff all over this house. I love Michael Nesmith. I was very sad when he passed. But today we are going to celebrate the man. We're going to celebrate the career, the discography. We are going to rank the albums of Michael Nesmith. Now, before I get into this, the subjectivity notice. Of course, it's the subjectivity. I've got to do the subjectivity notice. All artistic appreciation is inherently subjective. There is no such thing as objectively good or objectively bad art. There is only art that I like and art that I do not like. There will be things that I rate highly that you would not rate highly. There will be things that you would rate highly that I will not. And that's fine. It's a matter of taste. There are things that I prefer. There are things that you prefer. That's all. That's good. Talking about the art that you like with other people who like the art form is always fun. It's a challenging conversation, and it helps you better understand the community that you live in. Always a fun thing. Right up to the point where somebody starts thinking in terms of there being a right or wrong answer. No, this does not exist. There is only music that you like and music that you don't like. We also need to talk about the ground rules. When we rank albums here at Papa Nick's Music, we've got 4 rules we go by. First, it has to be an original album. I don't do compilations. I don't do reimaginings, remixes, that kind of stuff. Second, it has to be a studio album. Don't do live albums. Third, it has to be an album. I don't do EPs. It's got to have a certain critical mass. And then finally, it has to be an album as its primary purpose. This is the thing that I use to exclude soundtracks and Christmas albums. And we've got all of these that we are excluding for Mike Nesmith. If I'm working backwards, we're not doing soundtracks, so we're not doing his soundtrack to Time Rider. It's a very good soundtrack. We're just not going to include it. We don't do EPs, which is why I am not including the newer stuff. The newer stuff has 14 tracks. 8 of the 14 are previously unreleased songs. The other 6 are songs taken from his last couple of albums of the late 70s. And they are supposedly remixed, but mostly, as far as I can tell, that means things like they take a sound effect out of the beginning. They're not substantially different. And so I'm not going to include the newer stuff, even though over half of it is new, simply because there's only 8 new songs on there. That's an EP. That's not a full-length album. We only do studio albums. We don't do live albums. And there are a shit ton of really good Mike Nesmith live albums out there. There are several really good live albums. I would encourage you to check out Live at the Brit. Of these 4 is probably my favorite. But we're not doing any of these live albums. We're not doing the Movies of the Mind or any of that stuff. And then, firstly, it has to be an original. We don't do compilations, so we're not doing the newer stuff or the older stuff. But I don't like to do reimaginings, re-envisionings, and this is why I'm not including 1968's The Wichita Train Whistle Sings. If you are not familiar with this, controversy right off the bat, I would argue that you're not missing much if you're not familiar with The Wichita Train Whistle Sings. It is not, in my opinion, a particularly good album. But what he did was, in I would rather pay my friends to make a record than give this same amount to the IRS move, which I applaud. I like that kind of lateral thinking. Nesmith got together a bunch of musicians. They spent a weekend recording, big band / marching band versions of songs that he had written and released with the Monkees. And it is, I cannot recommend The Wichita Train Whistle Sings. So I'm pretending that it doesn't exist. So we're just limiting ourselves to regular, normal studio albums. I am including First National Band albums here, and technically Second National Band. So that gives us 13 albums that he released between 1970 and 2015 that we're going to be ranking here. Ready? Cool. Coming in at number 13. Now, the fact that this album is at number 13 does not mean that it is a crap album. It just means that of these albums, it is the least album-like. Okay? And that is the last thing that he released, the last original recording he released, 2015's The Ocean. Now, The Ocean is the third part of a sequence of albums, a series of albums, a trilogy. I'm not sure what to call these things. The first one was The Prison, the second one was The Garden, the third one was The Ocean. The idea of all of these is you're going to put this album on, you're going to put the record on the record player, you're going to pop the CD into the tray, and as you listen to the music, you're going to read a book, right? So it's an album that comes with a book. And the album is then the soundtrack to the movie that plays in your mind while you're reading the book. An interesting idea. It's extremely difficult to do and of limited value, I think, when you try to do it. But the problem I have with The Ocean is not in the content of it. I mean, it's the third part of this, and there are philosophical ideas, what is existence, what is knowledge, this sort of stuff that he's exploring in all three of these. And I very strongly recommend getting The Ocean, as I very strongly recommend getting The Prison, getting The Garden, and if nothing else, reading the stories. There is, I think, a lot that you can get from reading these stories. The problem I have with The Ocean is that it is pretty much just it's the story. He's doing this to get that third part of the story out before he hangs it up and calls it a day. And as a result, the music My note is not much in the way of music, mostly ambient chords and sound effects. Right? It's wind whistling and you know ambient music. And I'm not slagging off on ambient music here. I'm just saying if we judge it by the standards of ambient music, it's still not all that great, right? So musically, there's not much of anything here. I was glad to get the third part of the story, was glad to see where things were going. So I recommend that you get it, but we got 12 that you need to get first. Number 13, 2015's The Ocean. Number 12. Now, of all of these albums, keep in mind, I really like Michael Nesmith. I think the world of this guy. His ability to write songs that are musically simple, musically direct, but lyrically complex just impresses the hell out of me. I love this man's music. That being said, he's got one album that I think is a clinker, and that is 1972's Tantamount to Treason, Volume 1. Technically by the Second National Band. I am not a big fan of Tantamount to Treason. In fact, I had a hard time coming up with a positive thing to say about it. My note in the pro column in my spreadsheet here is, because there is nothing about this album that I can recommend. This is the only D album we've got in the group here. For those of you who are just now seeing one of these ranking videos for the first time, when I'm listening to albums, when I'm first thinking about how to sort them, I think in terms of letter grades. C is average, normal, competent, okay. B is recommended. D is I will recommend you stay away from this. A is, oh my God, you've got to get a copy of this. And F is, oh my God, light a match, right? And Tantamount to Treason Volume 1 is a good solid D record. It is not bad. It's not technically bad. It's not going to leave a bad taste in your mouth. It's not going to leave a stain in the toilet that you just can't get rid of. But there's not much reason to listen to it a second time. So, number 12, Tantamount to Treason Volume 1. Okay, from here on, we're B's and A's. Couple of B's and then A territory. This is all really good stuff from this point forward. Coming in at number 11. Had to remind myself where I was in the lineup. Number 11, we've got 1973's pretty much your standard ranch stash. If nothing, the guy knows how to name an album. There are a couple of really good songs on here. Continuing, I think, is a wonderful song. He does a version of a song that he wrote many years prior, Some of Shelley's Blues, that, if you dig around in various Monkees compilations, you'll find the Monkees tried recording Some of Shelley's Blues. He'd had that thing for a few years at this point. And those are both fantastic songs. They're good enough that they are reason to buy the album. Not much else on it is all that great. It's not bad. It's just, it doesn't have the quality songwriting that the rest of the albums have. So, number 11, pretty much your standard range stash. Number 10. Okay, so I said before number 11 that we're all in B's and A's territory. 11, that's a B album. 10 on, we're in A's. These all get A's. They're all great albums. Very strongly recommended. Number 10 is 1971's Nevada Fighter. Nevada Fighter is the third album that was released by the First National Band. First National Band was the group that Nesmith formed in the immediate aftermath of the Monkees. First National Band is what most people are talking about when critics and music historians and just generally, blowhards like me, start talking about things like, well, Mike Nesmith helped create country rock. We're thinking about First National Band when we make that kind of sweeping statement. You've got Nez on guitar. You've got Orville J. Red Rhodes on the electric Hawaiian pedal steel guitar. Bassist and a drummer. John Ware, I think. I'll double check that. And they're playing pop tunes that have a bit of a country twang to them, if only because of the pedal steel guitar. And they're all very good albums. Nevada Fighter, of the three, is the lesser of the three, the least of the three. Mostly because it's cover dependent. All of these albums, have 10 or 11 songs on them, and on Nevada Fighter, half of them are covers. So only half of the songs are original. The other albums maybe have one or two covers apiece. Most of the first two albums are original Nesmith songs. And so I think Nevada Fighter suffers a little bit from that. That being said, one of my favorite songs on the album is a cover. It's, I don't know that it's a cover. It's a song that Red Rhodes wrote called Renee, that is just a lovely little instrumental. But it also has good Nesmith songs on here. The Grand Ennui is on this album. Here I Am is a lovely song on this album. I do like Texas Morning, which is a cover. Michael Martin Murphy and somebody else wrote that one. So, it's a grab bag. The Nesmith song on here that I'm not that fond of, that I think most of his fans really like, is Propinquity. I've just begun to care, which is a little on the droney side to me, so not that fond of Propinquity. But Nevada Fighter, good solid A-. Coming in at number 9, 2005, he released Raise. And a lot of Nesmith fans really like Raise. I like Raise. I don't really like it. I don't think it's as good as his earlier stuff, obviously. I've got it at 9 out of 13. Mostly, it just seems like it's been assembled. Okay? I don't know a great deal about his process for recording this thing, but I have read interviews where he talked about it as a thing that existed in bits and pieces, and it wasn't until he had arranged the bits and pieces in a certain way that he saw that there was an overall narrative arc that appealed to him, and and then it came into focus and he saw the album that was there. But each of the songs also has that sense to it. It sounds to me like something that was cut and pasted in Pro Tools or something similar, of a bunch of different little snippets that are just kind of strung together. And I think that's being harsh, because I don't know that that's actually what he did, and then B, there's nothing wrong with that. That's what Brian Wilson did when he created Good Vibrations. It was one of the best records ever made. So yeah, it's not like this is a legitimate criticism, and I'm aware of that. It just sounds a little disjointed to me. That being said, there are some really good songs on here. Dynaflow, the lead-off track, I like that one. Land of Pies is good. There It Is. Oh, I love There It Is. That's one of those I can listen to on a loop. So there's a lot of good stuff on here. It's just overall the quality is not quite as consistent. It's not quite as steady as I would like. So it's at number 9, Raise from 2005. Number 8, we've got one of his later 70s albums, 1977's From a Radio Engine to the Photon Wing. A part of me really likes this album, really wants it to be higher. I mean, if I'm shooting from the hip and you ask me, ooh, what's a really good Michael Nesmith album? I mean, yeah, this one is going to come out. There's a lot to recommend it. This is the album that has Rio on it. It's got Casablanca Moonlight. It's got Love's First Kiss. I just love Love's First Kiss. That's a great song. There's really only one song that I look at and I think, I'm not... Wisdom Has Its Way is... I get tired of that one pretty quickly. It's just... I think of this one and I think it's wonderful in isolation. And then I start stacking it up against the others and I think, okay, yeah, it's wonderful. It's just not... I like that one better. It's the problem of I'm at number 8 out of 13, and I would, this album is it's in solid A territory, and if I could go in and swap out one or two songs, it would be up in A plus territory. And I mean, we're pretty far down in the list to be making that kind of a decision. So number 8 is 1977's From a Radio Engine to the Photon Wing. Number 7 and number 6. I've actually got these at 7 and 6, but I'll be honest, this is really close to a tie. It's close to a tie because I have a hard time separating the two, and it's close to a tie because the two are so intertwined with one another. Number 7 is 1974's The Prison, and number 6 is 1994's The Garden. So I was talking about the ocean back there at number 13. Well, this is part 1 and part 2, The Prison and the Garden. And I end up giving the ranking nod to The Garden. I put The Garden above The Prison because I think the music in The Garden is better than the music in The Prison. If I'm thinking of this as a set of compositions, right? If I'm thinking of it as a group of songs, then The Prison starts edging up. The Prison has some really good songs on it. Dance Between the Raindrops, I really like. Marie's Theme, I really like. The music itself, the actual performance of the music, is a bit sparse. It's a very lightly performed album. There's not a lot of instrumentation on it. The Garden has the level of the instrumentation is much better. The performers are better, and the music is more complex and is a little bit richer than the music that's on The Prison. Not much in the way of lyrics on The Garden. More about that in a second. Which is a little bit of a drawback for me because I know the bits of the music that I like. I'm just never quite sure which one is in which song because they're instrumentals. If I'm going to listen to one or the other, chances are good I'm going to listen to The Garden rather than The Prison. I think The Garden musically is better than The Prison, so The Garden comes in at number 6, The Prison comes in at number 7. But they're both fantastic. Now, if we're talking about experiencing these works the way Nesmith wanted you to, where you're sitting there listening to the music and reading the book, then The Garden wins hands down, because there are precious few lyrics. It is extremely difficult to listen to a song that has lyrics while you are reading a story. There's too much language. The language is buttoned up against each other. So if you're going to try to experience these two things together the way Nesmith wants you to, that's much easier to do in The Garden. That gives The Garden a little bit of an edge, I think. They're both fantastic works. I love reading both of the stories, and I very much enjoy listening to the music on both. So 7, The Prison, 6, The Garden, from 1974 and 94, respectively. Okay, we're in our top 5 now. Number 5, we have the second of the 3 First National Band albums. Number 5 is 1970's Loose Salute. I really like this album. This album really only has one drawback. It just happens to be a pretty good drawback, or pretty good-sized drawback. This album has wonderful songs on it. Silver Moon is great. Tengo Amor is great. Thanks for the Ride, I love. Bye, Bye, Bye. I really like Bye, Bye, Bye. The problem we have here is that this has the song called Conversations, which was originally titled Carlisle Wheeling back in the days when he was trying to get the Monkees to record it. And I do not like this song. This song is like Propinquity. It's one of those that a lot of Nesmith fans really like because they like the lyrical content of it. I find the lyrical content to be a little heavy-handed, and more importantly, I find the music, while I normally appreciate simple musical ideas, I find these songs to be repetitive to the point of droning. Conversations is a huge skipper for me. So, but apart from that one song, oh man, this is a good album. 1970, Loose Salute. Number 4. At this point in Nesmith's career, he's released a string of albums to not very much commercial success. He's starting to get bored of that, so he's starting to look for other things to do, and his attention is attracted by video. And so he starts making, he has been for the last couple of albums making videos for his songs, but at this he shifts gears completely and starts thinking in terms of video as the primary medium. Releases Elephant Parts, which was the work that forced the Grammys to create a Grammy Award for long-form video so that they could reward what he had done. The last album that he did before he got into that, which is why the music from this album is so heavily represented in Elephant Parts, is 1979's Infinite Rider on the Big Dogma. I love this album. This is a great album. We've got a bunch of fantastic songs on here. Magic is good. Tonight is good. Karaoke is good. Capsule is good. One of the things that strikes me as interesting about this album is that every song on here, 10 songs on this album, and all 10 of them have one-word titles, which is unusual for Nesmith. They also tend to make sense when you're listening to the song, which is not always the case with Nesmith's songs. There's really only one stinker on here, and that's the song called Horse Race. And it's not that it's a bad song, it's just not a great song. It's not a particularly good lyric, and the way he says Magnum Force bugs me. But apart from that, this is a really strong album. It does sound like 1979, so be warned going into it. But if you're okay with the way 1979 sounded, you're going to like this album. Infinite Rider on the Big Dogma. Number 4. Okay, number 3. Now, a lot of these videos, you get to this point and people start saying, well, you know, on any given day, I could put blah, 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 blah. I hate that. It's like, no. If you're telling me that on any given day, these could be in any order, then what the hell are you ranking them for? Come on. That being said, these are my 3 favorite albums. And they are sufficiently different from one another that I think you could make the argument that that I've got a 3-way tie here for first place. I don't actually think of it that way. I think the way I've got them ranked is the way they actually shake out. But the differences here, I mean, you've got to get out a micrometer to be able to measure the difference between 1 and 2 and the difference between 2 and 3. There's a pretty good gap between 3 and 4, but 1, 2, and 3 are very tightly bunched. And they're all 3 A+ albums. They are all 3 as close to perfect as Nesmith gets. Coming in at number 3. Number 3 is 1970's Magnetic South. Magnetic South was the first of the 3 First National Band albums, and I adore this album. If I'm making my list of, okay, why do I like listening to the First National Band albums? Why do I like listening to this music? The songs I'm going to point to come from Magnetic South. This is the album that has Calico Girlfriend on it, which I love. It's got Joanne on it. It's got Mama Nantucket on it. It's got The Crippled Lion. When late 20-teens, 17, 18, that neighborhood. Nesmith did a series of concerts. He did, I want to say 2 tours but they were smallish tours, so it was probably one that had a big break in it. With the First National Band Redux. The only member of the original First National Band who was in the new First National Band was Nesmith himself. Red Rhodes had died several years earlier. None of the other guys, I don't know if they were dead or alive, but no. And he found a steel guitar player who wasn't quite as innovative, avant-garde as Red Rhodes, but was still could play the way Red Rhodes played. And so he got some folks together, including two of his sons, and let's do this. Let's go back and revisit these. And I drove over to Houston to catch a performance of the First National Band Redux. And they played The Crippled Lion. And I didn't think I would ever be able to hear that song performed live in a way that was faithful to what appeared on that first album. And when it started, and I reckon because it's got a distinctive introduction to it, I burst into tears because it was just, I mean, I've got goosebumps now thinking about it. Oh, I love Magnetic South. This is why I like those three albums, because this is the one that started it. Oh. Number 3, 1970s Magnetic South. Number 2, very different album. In one of his concert videos, the Live at the Brit, which I strongly recommend that you watch if you've not seen it before. He's got this running commentary as they're playing songs from this period of his career. And he's talking about how he recorded several albums for RCA, and they came to him at one point and said, Nez, we really enjoy doing these albums for you because, we like you and we like the music, but you got to start trying to have a hit or else we're not going to be able to keep going here. I mean, we got to sell some product. And in response to that request, in 1972, he wrote and recorded the album, and the hits just keep on coming. I love this album. This album is just Nesmith and Red Rhodes. Just the two of them. There's no bass, there's no keyboards, there's no drummer, there's no horn section, there's no nothing. It's Michael Nesmith playing his acoustic guitar and singing, and Red Rhodes playing the steel guitar in the background. And this is a beautiful album. It's got wonderful songs on it. Tomorrow in Me is great. The Upside of Goodbye is great. Listening. Oh, I love that song. Some really good stuff on here. It's got a couple of stinkers. The Candidate is... Harmony Constant is one of those like Propinquity and Conversations that I think most fans like. And I'm just like... It's about 10 verses, or it seems to be about 10 verses longer than it needs to be. But overall, And the Hits Just Keep On Coming is just a beautiful album. I very strongly recommend it. But my number one album is 1992's Tropical Campfires. For this album, we've still got Red Rhodes, but we now have some of the musicians who were playing in the late 70s and 80s with him, John Hobbs. John Jorgensen on guitar does some wonderful work on these. Luis Conte on hand percussion. And this is just a brilliant album. Of these albums, it is the best sounding album. He just produced the hell out of this thing. This thing sounds good. We've got some wonderful songs on here. Yellow Butterfly is on here. Laugh Kills Lonesome. I Am Not That. I love these. We've got some covers on here that are very good. A couple are In the Still of the Night. His version of In the Still of the Night is not exactly adventurous, but it's very well done. His version of Brazil is fantastic. There's a lot of really good music on here. The only thing I've got that's even close to a con is there's one song that is a little bit too long. It's the ballad on here. It's called Juliana, and it's it's a little bit too long. But apart from that, this is just a beautiful album. This is, I think, as close as he got to a perfect album, because it's only got the one song that is almost a skipper. Not quite. I love Tropical Campfires. Great album. So, that's how I see the albums of Michael Nesmith. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Leave a comment below. Let me know what you think I got right, what you think I got wrong. If you enjoyed the conversation, then I would appreciate it if you would click the like button. If you... Sorry, I just remembered I forgot to get my die out. If you would be interested in additional conversations, then please consider subscribing. And if you subscribe, click the little bell for notifications. And again, thank you very much for watching the video. I'm glad you made it this far, by the way. And I hope that the rest of your day is entertaining. See you soon.